Welcome to the Healthy Home Show. We are your hosts, Fernanda Furman, Healthy Home Architect.
Hi, I'm Eric Furman. I'm a healthy home contractor.
And today we're here talking to Dr. John Dempster. Hi, Doctor.
Hello.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
Great.
Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Yeah, I think.
You're very welcome.
So we're going to get started by reading your biography, and then we're going to jump into the questions.
Great.
Okay, so Dr. John Dempster is a board certified. He's board certified in both naturopathic and functional medicine, and is the founder of the Dempster Clinic Center for Functional Medicine. He focuses on a functional medicine model to treat patients ranging from high-performance individuals to those wanting to treat or prevent chronic illness. Dr. Dempster is the founder of the Healthy Gut Institute, an in-depth online program designed to help identify and treat root causes of chronic digestive issues. Dr. Dempster writes regularly for a number of publications and lectures on a variety of health and wellness topics. In addition, he's also featured frequently on national television, radio, newspapers, and magazines. For information on Dr. Dempster, you can visit his website at thedempsterclinic.com.
Yeah, so we thought that having you here would be so important because of the work you are doing and the message that you are sharing with everybody on your YouTube channel. Actually, your listeners can find him on a lot of his videos on YouTube channel. Short videos, direct to the point, and very helpful. And for us, when I got sick, when I got extremely ill, I could not find the answers. And going back to the Western, doctors, it was just hard because nobody could understand what was going on with me. And it took us many years to even hear about functional doctors. So we think it's so important that all the work that you are doing and trying to actually heal the body, find the cause, and then heal it instead of just medicating it. So your work, it's very important, and we're very pleased to have you here today.
Well, thank you. It's great to be here.
Yeah. So what made you choose to practice functional medicine? How did you get in that path?
Well, it goes back to, I knew I was going to be a doctor and I didn't know any different. So I was heading into traditional medicine, gunning for that all through my pre-med. And in about my third year, I became aware of functional medicine through a very close friend of mine, and more so actually at the time it was naturopathic medicine. Functional medicine wasn't really on the radar quite yet. But as I learned more and more about what naturopathic medicine offered, it was more patient-centered, and it had a lot to do with investigating a lot of different areas and angles, and it came from a clinical nutrition standpoint, which really appealed to me. And it's not that I wasn't interested in traditional medicine, it's just I had a big, strong upbringing with nutrition in my family and my household, so it was always a language that we spoke, and we had some, really, we lost some family members to chronic disease, so it really gave us a time and a process to say, hey, what's going on here? So my parents were really fundamental in changing our diets as young children. I'm the oldest of four, and even my grandfather, who's alive today, and he's 94, huge advocate of nutritional health. And so it really just stuck with me, and I wasn't getting those answers with the med schools I was applying to about their nutritional program. So it was more of a natural fit into naturopathic medicine. And as I was going through naturopathic medicine, I was always asking the question, okay, how can we customize a program to an individual as opposed to just treating the label? Because that's still often what we do in medicine right now, is we treat the label, we don't treat the person. And it's important to understand what the root of the problem is. And we hear that a lot with functional medicine, but really it's a patient-centered, systems-oriented approach. And that was just so powerful to me, and it really drew me in. And it's something I've been continuing to learn for the last 13 years in practice.
Wow. Yeah, it's refreshing to hear that. It's a shame you don't really see that so much. I don't know how it differs in Canada, but here we've noticed over the last 5 or 10 years, especially Fernanda coming from Brazil, she was shocked, not in a pleasant way, the lack of time, the lack of care when you go visit a normal Western doctor here. Just they're in and out in 5 minutes, and you're waiting there 3 hours. First of all, you get to see them for all the 5 minutes, and it's all about prescription drugs to mask all of the symptoms for all these things you don't even know what you have. So did you think, like you said, did you do all of your schooling in Canada?
Yeah, I did my my pre-med at University of Guelph, and then I did my naturopathic medicine here in Toronto, and then I went and became board certified in functional medicine actually in the U.S. Through A4M in the U.S. and continued to work with them. So it's interesting. Healthcare is in such a interesting place right now, and I'm a firm believer that there's a time and a place for Western medicine. I truly believe that has its massive role. So I'm not against any form of Western medicine, but we always want to make sure that we're first doing no harm, and secondly, are we really creating a healing response in the body? And functional medicine to me offers a lot more of the tools and the techniques to help us really uncover and unearth certain blind spots that might be sabotaging our health, underlying triggers that might be getting in the way of us reaching our best potential. And I think that is something that we also need to leverage a lot more in our society, so that we can have a really truly have an integrative approach going forward. Because I see that integrative approach as being the best approach that healthcare can offer anybody right now.
Yeah, and I love what you said about how you don't treat the label, you treat the patient, because that it's huge. That itself just changes your mindset on how you approach the symptoms. So, and what have you seen in your patients when you're treating your patients when they come to you? What are the most common symptoms that they have when they look for help?
Well, I'd say I have three big demographics of patients that come in. One is of the autoimmune family. We see a lot of different types of autoimmune disease. There's over 200 different types of autoimmune conditions that are diagnosed right now. And so we see a variety of them. We see a second sort of bucket of patients. We see a lot of digestive complaints come through. And this is also a big passion of mine, which is why I created the Healthy Gut Institute, to really help as many people as we can that not can only come in here in person, but can also take advantage of some help from afar. And the third group are basically people that are looking to hit their best potential, whether that's, to have their best energy and literally just to live as well as they can, to optimally age. And that's something, it's not an anti-aging. Anti-aging to me has a different stigma associated with it. It's optimal aging. And it's about really helping somebody just hit their peaks and live as best a quality life for as long as they can.
I like that, optimal aging. Yeah, and just to throw that in, we absolutely are on the same page with you too. Yeah, Western medicine definitely has its place. If I break my arm, if I get in an accident, if I have a heart attack, that's the first place I'm going. But it's more about these little things, these maybe like preventative type of stuff. Yeah, we're just not seeing those answers there. And you said something about the gut and the second one. So one of the questions we had was, how do environmental toxins like found in the water, such as arsenic, cadmium, chromium, for example, all these other heavy metals, how do they damage the gut, and what should we be paying attention to, and like what are the symptoms associated with that type of exposure?
Yeah, sure. There's so many toxins that we're exposed to, and I think it's important to also recognize that it's not about being perfect. It's very hard to live in society today where we're not exposed to anything, and so I think it's important that we don't get too overzealous about living in a bubble and not having a life. But there are a lot of things that we can do that we can start to clean up our environment. We can clean up the environment in our homes. We can clean it up in our workspaces. We can clean it up outside. And we can also clean it up inside our body. And so this is often some of the conversations that we'll have. So to your question about heavy metals specifically, we're getting hit with those in a variety of different means right now. We're getting hit with them through certain water supplies. We're getting hit with them through certain medications and potentially foods, such as fish. It's notorious, the bigger the fish, usually the higher concentration of mercury, for example. Lead is quite interesting because oftentimes people aren't getting exposed to it anymore from an acute exposure. It's what we were exposed to either when we were in utero, when we were in our mother's womb, because during pregnancy, there's certain hormones that will actually release parts of bone tissue, and lead is classically stored in bone. So often that will get mobilized and pass through into the fetus. But we can also be, if we're over the age of 30 on this planet right now, we would have been exposed to leaded gasoline at some point. And, leaded gasoline is still probably prevalent in some parts of the world, but in North America, specifically Canada, we haven't We don't see a lot of leaded gasoline for the last few decades, but that's something that we could have accumulated as a young person. And if our body doesn't have the detoxification mechanisms working functionally well enough to clear that out, it can accumulate, and our body will often push that aside into bone tissues and other tissues in our body. There's metals out there such as cadmium, thallium. These are things that are found in high amounts in certain foods. Actually, we're seeing a lot of thallium actually found in kale, which may sound a little alarmist, and I'm a big fan of kale. Please, it's not about that. But kale is found in earth, and we want to make sure that if we're going to eat lots of vegetable-based foods, that we are getting rotation and not just focusing on one vegetable group too. I think sometimes we need to come back to the basics and make sure that we're not overdoing a healthy intention as well, that to the point where it becomes a little bit out of balance. But cadmium can come in all sorts of industries, so this isn't a lot of pollution that we can, smog potentially, that we could be breathing in on our streets, and through different types of plants that are releasing pollutants into the air. And they do various things for our gut. They do a lot of things throughout our entire body. They're often what are called neuroendocrine disruptors. And what that means is that they can disrupt a lot of the neurotransmitters and a lot of the hormones in our body, and of course that can have a massive downstream impact on a lot of different tissues. But when it comes back to the gut, it's interesting because a lot of our neurotransmitters are actually produced and formed in the gut. And right now, depending on the neurotransmitter, these could be things like serotonin or GABA, and anywhere between 72 to 90% of these can be actually made in our gut tissues. And if we've got some disruption in our good bacteria, such as our microbiome and our microflora that we hear a lot about, then we can start to have some other impacts there. We all hear about things called leaky gut. And there are certain toxins in our environment, including heavy metals, that have been shown to actually start to break apart the bridges that hold together some of these healthy cells. And they're often held together by a protein called zonulin. And we can actually measure that in some of the testing that we do with our patients to see if zonulin is coming out in our bloodstream or in our fecal matter, and if it's coming out at higher amounts. And we have an idea that somebody is actually dealing with leaky gut. It's something that I think gets thrown around a lot. People assume they have it if they have gut issues, but oftentimes there's lots of other things that can trigger gut symptoms that it doesn't actually equate to leaky gut. So that's just a few things. So heavy metals are very important to clean out and to effectively remove from our environment as much as possible. So I always say, look at your drinking water for starters. I think that's a really important thing. Look at your homes. And this, I know you guys are passionate about home health, and lead notoriously was in a lot of paint. And, again, if you're dealing with older paints, then this could potentially be off-gassing. Mercury as well. It's found in a lot of different medications that could be in your home. And that's not even to get into some of the other chemicals and compounds that we find in cleaning products, et cetera. But, it's about taking a common sense approach, taking a step back. It's not about being overzealous about everything, but we often will measure a lot of these toxins in our patients to find out what do we need to specifically focus on for that person. Remember, I kind of try to come at it from a patient-centered approach. And if we find that they have a lot of these metals in their body, we'll help them remove them.
Wow, that was so much, like all this great information. And I'm just going to start addressing one thing that you said about lead, because one of the conversations that we had with some mothers in a workshop about lead exposure, they were saying, no, we don't have lead exposure anymore. They only associate lead with one thing, that it's paint, and they were associating that with the house. Our house is nearly painted and we're not exposed to that. Now, you were saying that it can actually be transferred from, let's say, my mother to me. How many generations can this be passed on in terms of in the bond from the mother to the kid?
Well, it would be passed on directly to you from your mother, and your mother may have gotten it from her mother, and so on and so forth. So it could be a bit more of an accumulative effect that happens over time. Everybody has their own detox pathways that are either functioning well or not at all. And so just because your mother gave you lead potentially, it doesn't mean it necessarily is going to impact you, or you're not going to be able to clear it out. Maybe you are able to detoxify things better than your mother was. So there's a lot of unique individuality, but it can accumulate through lineages.
That's when we come to the overload. And I think that's what it happened to me, was the overload, because we used to flip homes. We used to, do that ourselves while we're living in the house. And the last time we did it, that's when I got extremely ill to start with. And it was the building materials. We installed dual panel windows. We had, the house was freshly painted. Then we had glued down engineered flooring, which is high, in formaldehyde. So closing everything, new air conditioner, and I work from home. So everybody's out of the house, but I'm in. So I'm the one, as you're saying, everybody reacts and they have their detox path differently. But when you start overloading a person, bombarding from everywhere, and it's like you said, it's impossible to live in the bubble and not being exposed. But if you can reduce as much as possible, we have a higher chance of not, like lasting a little bit longer before we crash, I would say.
Well, the irony is oftentimes the air in our homes is significantly more toxic than the air that we breathe outside, even in an urban environment. And we have to be proactive in understanding what can we do to reduce that exposure inside of our homes. And of course, this is what you two do, and it's a great initiative. But there's some very simple things that people can start to do in terms of putting filters on their water, for example, putting specific air filters into their home. And these don't have to be big, expensive pieces of equipment, but there are some great technology pieces that can be applied to help really reduce that.
Absolutely. And I wanted to agree with you on another point too, is so hard. I put myself in the listener's shoes, because it's hard to go back to where we started and just go, absolutely, we're not going to live in a bubble. We love technology. During our interview with Dr. Pizzorno, he said it really well. He said, I love technology, but it's just learning better habits. And like you said, there on the water and the air, there's, inexpensive to really expensive, depending on how you live and what you need to do, where you can fix it. One of the funniest things, one of the aha moments for us as we went through our journey is, and it's just so basic, right? It's bring fresh air back into the house. That was it cures all the VOCs, gets your oxygen levels back up, gets rid of the CO2 that's building up in the house. All of these things are, most of the time, Toronto's a little tougher, and in the middle of summer here, sometimes not ideal, but yeah, fresh air is what we found is one of the most important things in a home that's not really happening here, that the energy initiatives have kind of closed us into a big sealed box.
And a big way to create fresh air, if we can't open the windows, is just put some house plants. Get some plants in the home. There's so many things that you can do, from high technology down to low technology. Yeah. And house plants are constantly pulling toxins from the air. And we want to make sure that, we help people from the easiest way up.
Yeah. I have a question too, talking about these toxins. And this is one of the things that we want to help people with, and maybe you can explain, what should people be looking for? It's a challenge, I know, because these are cumulative effects when we're talking about the home, especially, or any toxins, really. Correct me if I'm wrong, but so your body is accumulating all these things. But what are the symptoms that people should look out for when they go, hey, I need to go see you and get an appointment? Like, something's not right. What are the symptoms people are going to be?
The simplest symptoms that we see are people starting to complain of brain fog, low energy, they're not sleeping well. And they can be a lot more serious than that as we go up the scale, right? But really, people walk in and just like, oh man, I just don't feel good. And I've had some patients come to me after they've invested a tremendous amount of money building a beautiful smart home. And I'm sure you know what those are, but unfortunately the smart homes, I think, sometimes are the dumbest things to do, because you surround yourself in this electrosmog, and you've got to be so careful of that.
So little side note, the name of our business 5 years ago was Smart Home. In the beginning of the name, it's gone. Yeah, we're creating a dumb home now. But we've hardwired, we've limited our EMF, there's a lot of technology, but it's really about bringing nature back into the house and living in a different way than we were before. But yeah, it's unfortunate. Smart is not always smart.
And we're not going back to, the dark ages of no technology, but, surrounding yourself with all of this electrosmog, I think, can take a toll. Now, it's not just about that in the home, but if you're noticing that your clarity of thought is not as well as it used to be, your sleep habits have been disrupted, For a lot of my female patients, their hormones start to become dysregulated. And that's just something that, those are just little early clues. Like mold, for example, is a big one that we see. And mycotoxins that come from mold often aren't visible to you. You know, involved with renovations, you probably been shocked as you pull layers off the walls and seeing what's behind them when you don't see it on the outside. And we've got to be careful of where we're getting that mold exposure and how we remediate it.
Absolutely. So, not a funny story, but the last part of our journey of trying to get well, and you probably see this with your patients where it's like, okay, you knock out this big one and this one, but you just keep going. So we had done so many things, and the last one was hidden toxic mold inside of our walls. And we actually took about a year, but we basically brought it on as a service, and now we're certified in doing it. And yeah, it's tricky, especially for the ones that are hiding behind the walls that you don't see, and that's what we had.
And I think one of the challenge too is that for us, you know, when you get somebody to do the mold remediation, is like, okay, $80,000, starting at $80,000. So a lot of people just postpone, like we did. You know what? Let's just wait a little bit because we can still survive. And I think that's the mentality that for me it was wrong. Because you can still survive, but you're not surviving when you can't function, when you can't sleep, when you have anxiety, stress, and all of those symptoms that are actually not allowing you to be who you are or to do the things you used to do. So not even knowing how that was affecting our life. And that was not until we found a doctor, a functional doctor as well. Because once, you know, we did all this stuff and then I got better. And then out of the blue, it's like, okay, what's going on again? So basically like I was the thermometer. But one of the main issues that we found is testing, because every time I felt bad, I would go to the doctor, do all the blood tests, and it's like, everything's normal. And then you don't get the validation that you're actually feeling something, in that, you know, it's almost like, where do you go now? So I know you do some different testings. Is that possible to even test like your immunity to know if you're immune to something or not?
Oh, sure. Absolutely. And that's, you know, one of the benefits of working with the functional doctors. You'll be exposed to different types of tests and technologies that can open up a little bit more of the blind spots that you might not see visibly, and you know, and that might not be detected in traditional testing. So that's a lot of what we do with our patients. Is we'll get patients come to us from all over the place that have been dealing with chronic issues, but their labs keep coming back normal, and that's a good start, but it's certainly not a conclusion, and we have to pick up from there and carry on from there. For example, you know, if we're talking about things as important as nutritional elements like nutrients, well, if we do it in a serum test, we're only going to be looking at the last 12 to possibly 48 hours of exposure, which means that it often is just the meal that you had the night before. And that can go up and down depending on what patients are supplementing with, this or that. But where we are starting to spend more time looking is actually what's called an intracellular analysis, where we can go deeper into the cells. And that can tell us many weeks to even potentially even months of nutritional information that's been going on in the body. And that can give us a much more solid baseline as how we would target a treatment plan. When it comes back to the heavy metals conversation for a moment, you know, looking at heavy metals in a bloodstream is looking at a heavy metal toxicity, which is, again, a very acute exposure. But oftentimes our body does its very best to get those out of the bloodstream and push it into the tissues, as I mentioned and alluded to. We want to be doing a little bit more of a provocative analysis, where we put a provocative agent into the body and we collect what comes out into a urine test as one of the leading indicators to help look at what's called a body burden. And there's a difference there in terms of the definitions, but they're both equally important in terms of what they find. And so therefore, if we find a high burden of mercury, for example, in somebody, then we remove that, even though their blood test probably came back with no mercury being detected. So that just gives you an idea of some of the differences that we're looking at.
So then once you guys get your tests and you move towards treatment, can you explain some of the things like, for example, IV vitamin therapy or bioidentical hormone therapy, or some of the other things that you're doing after these tests and you get your results?
Absolutely. Yeah, we definitely look and we assess. I do a lot of assessment in how people are absorbing nutrients into their body by looking at how their gut is functioning. It's amazing how some of the labs out there can inform us if we have, malabsorption going on, or if we have enough good bacteria or not enough good bacteria, or any other infections that might be getting in the way of everything. And once we have a clear idea, then I have a better idea of what's the best delivery system. So if their gut is completely impaired, we have to work on their gut before we start filling them up with all sorts of different types of nutrients, expecting them to absorb that. But what we can do in the interim is the IV therapy is a very powerful tool. It's a very powerful adjunctive tool to help get things right into circulation so that we can absorb things right away without having to lose it in what's called the first pass effect, when things go through our digestive system and processed by our liver and kidneys. But the IVs are very, very powerful tool, and they're very safe when administered properly. And it's certainly something that we use a lot of for a variety of issues. People, again, looking at clearing toxins out of their body, or looking at repleting nutrients to help them function better, all the way to fighting certain infections and really bolstering their immunity. There's a lot of different reasons why we do it. And we will actually curate an IV for each patient. It will be customized to each patient depending on what their lab values show us.
Wow.
Wow, that's very interesting. So your approach, when you're doing the treatment, the IV treatment, for example, do you also help your patients creating a new type of diet or get into a different type of routine lifestyle, or do you just do the test and then you do the IV?
That's a great point. Functional medicine is not just about going straight to, a fancy supplement or a fancy IV. It's about treating the whole person. And we have to look at, okay, well, if the root cause of this person's issue is that they're pumping a bunch of sugar in their body, we have to discuss that. Or if we're missing a lot of the, organic green and colorful vegetables and fruits out there because we're detecting a very low antioxidant score, then we have to address that with food. Food is everything. Food is first. But sometimes when you're deep in a hole, you need a little bit of an assistance to get pulled out of that hole. And that's where supplements and different forms will be helpful. You can't out supplement a bad diet. And so it's supplements. The word supplement is to supplement a proper diet and a proper lifestyle. And so lifestyle is a conversation we will have with every patient. Diet, especially, in fact, we will oftentimes have one of our nutritionists work with them to customize a diet based on the results that we do. And I always tell my patients, I'm not a great meal planner. I'm the good guy and the bad guy. I say, eat this, don't eat that. But some people really need their handheld because this is very intimidating at first, making all these changes. And they often need that bit of extra support. And there's no shame in that. And we need that ability to help people start to, okay, this is how you shop. This is how you go and you buy the right foods. And by the way, this is how we read a label. So those are the ones that you don't want to be buying. And some of those basics are things that we take for granted, but we need to come back to those fundamentals and build on those.
Absolutely. So toxins come up quite a bit, and detox, which is seeming almost like a fad. So my next question is, what I'm thinking about all this stuff is, especially for the listeners, is would you recommend a detox for somebody to do on their own? There's so many books and so many methods. I mean, I personally would not, knowing what I know now, I would go to somebody like you, especially if you're close, would go to you and then listen to what you had to say. Because it seems like, from what I'm hearing, is you don't want to mess with detoxing on your own if you're actually detoxing with things like charcoals and things like that. So is it do it yourself, or definitely go see a functional doctor?
I think it's do what you can do. And,
Okay.
Not everybody, to be honest, not everybody can see a functional medicine doctor, whether it's due to proximity or resources or whatever it may be. And that does not mean that there's not things that they can do to help support the detox processes. To your point, one of my pet peeves are these one-size-fits-all cleanses that is meant to help everybody on the planet. And they may do a lot of things for a lot of people, but they can also, in some situations, do a lot of harm. And we have to be careful of that, because if we're detoxing, we should be asking the question, well, what are we detoxing? What are we trying to pull out? And what organs are we attempting to detoxify? And sometimes certain individuals already have some implications with those organs and those detox processes that need to be worked on to properly eliminate this toxic material. For example, in your liver, there's something called the phase 1 and the phase 2 detox pathways. And if they're not working in sync, you can actually create more damage by moving something into partway through the detox process, but then having it stop because their liver is missing certain nutrients to continue that process to eliminate it completely and neutralize it completely. So, that's just one example, but there's certainly a lot of things that we can learn online. We're in the information generation, and I certainly don't discourage people from learning how to do it yourself things. But it's always with a little bit of a warning and a caution when it comes to anything that's super aggressive and super extreme in a sense. You may want to run that past your healthcare provider.
And if you're not completely on your deathbed ill, and I think you mentioned this already, I just wanted to clarify this too, is your body, if it's being fed the right foods and you're taking care of yourself, is going to naturally detox itself. Is that right? I mean, potentially if everything's working correctly?
When given the right environment and given the right support, your body is an incredible tool, and it's a very resilient tool. And it's something that, yes, it can do a lot of things very well. Even if we are straying a little bit left or right of center at times, we can bring that back, and just give your body the chance to do what it needs to do and get out of your own way in a sense. Remove some of the junk that's happening not only on your plate but possibly with stress. That's a big thing that can really impair a lot of systems in our body. Do what you can in terms of environmental toxins that are in your immediate space, and the rest of it, don't overthink it too much. I like to investigate this stuff because I'm very passionate about it. But one thing that I've learned in recent years, because of the amount of information that's out there, is sometimes this can be an information overload for people, and it gives them analysis paralysis, and it actually makes them worse. Yes. And we have to be so careful with that as people trying to provide help and assistance. You've got to meet people where they're at as best as you can.
So that's exactly what happened to me, because I'm not really good at cooking. And to say the least, that's my kids. So I grew up with somebody that cooked our meals, and they were all fresh meals. They're amazing. But the way we used to eat before is different than the way we eat now. So when it came to time for me to make the changes, just thinking about, okay, now I have to exercise, I have to detox, I have to read the labels, I have to find better products, I have to do, cook. How do I cook? How do I shop? It was so stressful that I didn't get anything done. So one of the things that for me was very helpful, as you're saying, like I took one step at a time. Like, what is the one thing I can do today that I can learn today and make a different choice next time? So if it is buying the laundry detergent, if it is whatever it is, one thing at a time, that really helped me. Now, and I see how, as you're saying, like when you get at that moment, you don't do anything, and that's when bad things happen.
Well, I like what you say about that, and it's a big thing that we try to promote in our clinic here. It's not about perfection, it's about progress. And that's all you need to be focusing on. You just do something better today than you did yesterday, then we're going to get there. And it doesn't have to be a huge jump. It can just be 1 inch in front of the next in terms of, the amount of progress. Don't get overwhelmed, because it can be very overwhelming, especially the deeper you go into some of the, the depths of the internet in terms of, all the nuances of achieving optimal health. Sometimes it can come right back down to the basics, and we've got to make sure that we look at that first and create the pillars of health and build on that.
I love it. Yeah, that's great advice. Thank you.
So if people, do you treat patients over the internet as well? How is that process? Like if somebody wants to do a consultation with you, but like, for example, us, we're in, a different country, can people get your help still?
We do have patients that come to us around the world. Initially, we do meet with patients, and we do recommend that from a testing perspective. It allows us to do the testing that we need to do. There's been some challenges getting certain tests done in certain countries, so we want to make sure that we can get the right testing done. But we do have that ability to maintain an online relationship going forward, or a telephone relationship going forward once we're in.
And usually, how long do you see? And I know everybody's different. Every, treatment is different. But when do you see like patients start having a little bit of a, feeling better, or the treatment starting to take place? Does it take a long time? And I know, again, it depends how fast they go, but in your average in your clinic.
It does really depend. And it really depends on what's in front of us. What are those obstacles to cure? And so sometimes those will take 6 months or more. And sometimes we'll see changes happening within that first 3 days. And I like to say, look, I want to see something shifting within the next 3 to 4 weeks. And that's often sooner than that. But it doesn't mean that we're going to get from A to Z. It means we might get from A to B. And that's perfect. There are some very serious conditions that you're going to have to manage for the rest of your life. But it doesn't mean you're not feeling better in the interim. And so we've got to also, help people understand what's involved and what they can expect. And a lot of patients will feel some significant shifts within those first few weeks.
Nice.
Yeah. So from what we heard you saying is nutrition, taking care of your gut, removing or reducing the stressors, which would be either environmental toxins, food that you eat that it's not good, stress, whatever they are, and then just keep that optimal detoxing, and then keep repeating, right? And keep that new lifestyle going.
Well, and we are dynamic, so we do have some check-ins to make sure that everything is going well, and we want to make sure that we're keeping up with our body as it continues to evolve and change too. So the treatments are dynamic. They're not static, meaning that what I put somebody on today, that's going to change. Nobody's going to be on one supplement forever. Nobody's going to be on one necessarily diet forever. There might be nuances to that we do hang on to, but we want to make sure that we're adapting and evolving and also elevating with our patients and helping them take it to the next level each time and create new breakthroughs and get to that desired level of health. And that's, it's not to sound intimidating from wow, there's so much work involved. There really isn't, but there is some tune-ups. I always joke about this. We often look after our cars much better than we look after our bodies. We take them in for tune-ups. In Canada, we take them in for tire changes, winter tires, and and the rest of it. We're very good about that. We're programmed that, but we don't always get ourselves we don't put the proper fuel in, or we don't get the oil change that we need, and we don't change the spark plugs or whatever it may be. We've got to look at our bodies as something that we spend so much time and energy as we do often for other objects in our life.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's amazing. You already mentioned this, how resilient our bodies are. It's amazing. Some people can even sustain life on their diet and their lifestyle. It's actually fascinating to see. And, but then eventually, 5, 10, 15, everybody's different, right? So yeah, at some point you're going to hit the wall.
Yeah.
We don't like that. We like our patients to avoid the wall.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Or the floor. In my case was the floor because I couldn't get up. Well, thank you so much, Dr. John. You gave us so much of good insight and so much information that I hope our listeners can take and start thinking about their health in a different way, and also knowing where to go for help if they're having those symptoms, if they're feeling low energy, or if they're feeling the headaches, the brain fog, and whatever the symptoms that we can just associate to a normal level of stress to how we live today. And they can actually take that serious and look for doctors just like you. And do you have any final thoughts for our listeners?
Well, again, I think it's about, I'll repeat this, it's about making progress, not perfection. If you strive for perfection, it's going to drive you crazy, and it's very hard to achieve that, if virtually impossible. So please make this realistic for yourself, because you don't need to be so extreme that you can't live a full life, a great life, and still feel like you're, being responsible. It's very possible to do it all. And so, just focus on what can you do today that's going to be an improvement, and continue to work on that. If you're really serious about working on your health, and yes, get some roadmaps. What that means is, invest into some testing that can help guide you, work with a practitioner that can help guide you near you, and provide you some insight as to where your blind spots are, because we all have them. We can't always see them coming. And it's important to spend that time taking care of ourselves as we would, other things such as our cars, as we discussed earlier. So that would be my takeaway.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. So before we wrap up here, you have quite a generous gift that you'd like to share with everyone. Would you like to explain that? And we'll have the link embedded into this video.
Absolutely, yeah. For your listeners, I would like you to take advantage of a portion of our Healthy Gut Institute, which is an online in-depth program for anybody dealing with not only gut issues, but looking to optimize their health. And I'm going to, I don't know if donate's the right word, but offer the quick start module to anybody who's listening to this, and I'd be happy for you to take advantage of that.
Great.
Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure talking to you, and thank you for all the work that you do.
Yes, thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you.